Okay, I'm just waiting for notification of this to appear on the screen. Okay, the meeting is now recording, so I will take the sederant for the Employee Issues Forum on Tuesday the 26th of October 2021. I have apologies from Councillor Kalikes. I can see that we have Councillor Campbell, Councillor Convery, Councillor Dorman, Councillor Hamilton. Do we have Councillor Harrow? No. I can see that we have Councillor Horn, Councillor Lowe. Do we have Councillor McAdams? No Councillor McAdams, and I have apologies from Councillor McGuigan. Union representatives, we have present Kenny Wallace, Harry Scott, Tony Slavin. Have I missed any union reps out? No. And officers present today, we have Kay McVeigh, Eileen McPake, Stuart Nicholson, Angela Norris, Helen Colley, and myself, Carol Lyon. I'll hand back to yourself now, Chair.
Thank you, Carol. Do we have any declarations of interest? Don't see any hands. So do we have any declarations? Thank you. The minutes of the previous meeting of Employees Issues Forum held on the 17th of August 2021 in pages 3 to 6. I'll move that as the correct record. Do we agree?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. And Kay's going to provide an update on the questions raised by Councillor McGuigan and Councillor McAdams. Thank you, Kay.
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of the question that arose from Councillor McAdam, which was around about the care worker post, I think I gave an answer at the meeting to say that we didn't have a recruitment freeze in place, and we don't. So actually it's an area that we are pretty busy in terms of recruitment. So there was no freeze in place. So in answer to that question, in terms of Councillor McGuigan's question, which if I recall correctly was round about the veterans and if we had any further information round about that, I did get back to Councillor McGuigan and explain that that's not data that we hold within the system. In terms of veterans not making an appearance at interview, it's not something that's gathered within the national system, but we, from anecdotal evidence, so where some of my staff members have been speaking to veterans, generally it's because they've got something else. So they've not come for interview simply because they've had another post. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kay. Jerry, you've got your hand up.
It's just on the point that Kay made there. I take cognizance of what you're saying, Kay. So Councillor McAdams made the accusation that she was told by a social work officer that there was a recruitment freeze. So you're saying there wasn't. So who's telling the truth and who's telling the lie?
If you're happy, Chair, I'll respond. So unfortunately, I don't know which member of social work Councillor McAdam spoke to, but I spoke to the heads of service. I spoke and my own team who were busy recruiting in that area. So that's why I'm confident there's no recruitment freeze. Thank you, Chair.
Well, Chair, it should be in the minute here because she asked the question and it's not in the minutes. It should be recorded in the minute. Can we get that done, please? Thank you.
Okay, you happy to do that, Kay?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Joe, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I do. I want to know, I've tried to go through the papers here and see it. There have been 2 people dismissed off their jobs and the buses taking the kids to the schools. And the 2 of them has been dismissed, and the jobs are no dismissed because they sent them out to taxis, and taxis are taking these kids now to school. Can somebody explain to me, because this council is going to get herself into a hell of a mess if we don't get it sorted out.
Joseph, relating to the minutes, the previous minutes. Joe, is your question relating to the previous minutes?
No, it's not.
We're still on the minutes from the previous meeting.
I've tried to go through the minutes and I don't see it, but these people have been dismissed.
No, we're still discussing the minutes from the previous meeting.
Aye, but it's no in it must have come up. It must have been reported to this committee. And it's no here.
I don't think we can discuss it if it's not.
Maybe Stuart could tell us.
Well, we're still discussing the minutes, Joe. If it's not actually in the minutes, I don't think we can discuss it at this point.
Well, it should be in the minutes. That's what I'm saying.
Was it discussed at the previous meeting?
Unfortunately, I was in Gartnavel. That's where I was when the last meeting was. And I had to put in an apology.
Well, if it's not in the previous meeting, I don't think we can discuss it at this point.
Well, I can't see it. And I'm asking, why these people been dismissed?
It wasn't in the minutes, Joe.
Why their jobs have been taken over with taxes?
Joe, we can only discuss what was in the previous minutes. That's what we're discussing just now.
Well, thanks a million. It should be in the previous meeting so that we can see it, but it's not there.
Joe, how can you if it wasn't discussed? Come on, get a grip.
Well, you've got Harry Scott there.
We'll bring you in, Joe. We'll bring you in just now.
One of the members there is one of his members, and the other one's for Unite.
Joe, we're going to bring you in just now.
Thank you, Chair. To be helpful, perhaps what I could do is offline take the details from Councillor Lowe and get him an answer to his questions.
The answer I want to see is that these two ladies are brought back into their jobs, and no, for buses they sit up at Hull House and they've not got a job. The two of them come from my area.
Joe, sorry. Joe, we're discussing the minutes from the previous meeting.
Listen, you can discuss whatever you like, but the thing is, these people have been paid off. Give me an answer. That's what I'm looking for.
Okay, can we agree the minutes of the previous meeting, including case update?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to council-wide workforce monitoring in July to August 2021 and pages 7 to 28, and I'll ask Kate to take us through that. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you, Chair. I'm certain members will be familiar with some of the content of this. I do think I quite often go through the workforce monitoring, and folk will have seen it in other committees as well. So I'll try and be brief with this. So in terms of attendance statistics, the details that are within the paper covering the period August 21, and at that point our figure is 4.7% up in comparison with the figures from last year. And based on that, under annual trends, we're projecting a figure of 4.8% for the year. And in the bullets, you can see there we're seeing an increase across almost all of our conditions. So psychological, musculoskeletal, respiratory, but also stomach, bowel and blood disorders as well. As you would anticipate, we are taking lots of action round about supporting our workforce and either trying to keep them at work or provide them with the tools and support that they require in order to come back to work. And those are detailed at section 5. And I've got to apologise because in 5.1 we have got a slight error in our figures. So the comparison with the previous year is actually an increase, a slight increase of 52 in comparison with last year, not a decrease of 500. So we'll get those corrected. In terms of the other figures there, physiotherapy, as you would expect on the back of our musculoskeletal conditions increasing, you see an increase in terms of employees being referred over the period, and similarly an increase in terms of referral for employee support officer. So we're putting in place the supports that you would expect round about that. In terms of accidents and incidents in comparison with the same period in the previous year, the figure is down very slightly. And in terms of other items within the report, for leavers and exit interviews, our labour turnover still low for the period, 1%, just over that within this particular time frame, and that's given us a projected figure of 4.7%, which on analysis we think is doing pretty well in our current environment, where I'm sure members will have heard about perhaps the need for particular skills in other areas. So we know other employers are competing very much in some of the markets that we're also in. In terms of our leavers and exit interviews, we held exit interviews with 28% of our leavers over that period. Finally, I would just draw your attention to the recruitment monitoring. And again, these are statistics that we've been through already. But in terms of the applications over the period, we had over 2,000 applications, 97 of those coming from disabled candidates, 51 being shortlisted and 11 appointed. In terms of candidates from a Black and ethnic minority background, with 71, 19 were shortlisted and 3 were appointed. And disappointingly, we had 23 veterans applying, 9 shortlisted, none being appointed. And happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kate. Kate, any questions or comments for Kate? No, I'll be happy to note the report.
Yep.
Through Chair, Councillor McAdams has her hand up.
Oh, thank you. Councillor McAdams?
Hi, thanks, Chair. Thanks for the report as always, Kate. I know I know you're always like, what's somebody going to ask me with regards to these figures, which we always get stuck into it over. So apologies in advance. It was just to say that obviously these figures are having a knock-on effect on what's actually happening with regards to services that have been able to be delivered. When we were on the last committee, they were talking about obviously the recruitment fair. 500 jobs were available within the council, and I think it was something like, it was either like 67 or 69 people only turned up. So there was a difficulty with obviously taking on new staff, and obviously we know from the figures that we are having a problem keeping staff on. So if we look at it from the council-wide perspective, we look at these figures, but if we could look and think about our care sector. Obviously, there was a controversial story the other day which the council answered, and it was to do with an email that had been sent out to, it said 13,000, but I didn't realise that we had 13,000 people within our remit, so I thought it was perhaps a misquote figure, and it was actually 1,300. It was just to say, is that what our strategy is that we're going to look with our existing staff to actually take on the care and responsibilities? And if that's the case, what I did want to ask from a personal point of view, and it was actually regards to their wages. We all know just now that through regards to the self-directed support, it's just like we are a good council because, when Labour were in charge, they sorted out the fact that we would have the living wage for our staff, staff, and it was a simple case of we were at the forefront of all the authorities for being able to achieve that, which obviously staff are grateful for. But moving forward, when it comes to self-directed support, if a PA, for somebody to pay their PA, they're not able to pay them the living wage from the money that they obviously get, then obviously we've got a problem keeping the carers that we have. What is the current situation with regards to what we are looking to pay them? Are we looking to pay them more money so that we can look to retain them? And the other thing is, for the staff that we were putting that email out, that we were hoping that the staff were maybe going to take on extra shifts. If they were taking on an extra shift that was above their hours, were they getting paid time and a half, or were they just going to be offered their wage, or as a simple case of the only wage that they would get offered would be less than perhaps what they normally get paid, because they would be getting paid what the carers get paid? Because what I'm trying to work out is, from us offering that out to our staff, does that then put the people that are caring for our carers, are they getting put at more of a disadvantage? Because it then means, let's just say you decide to take on and you think, do you know what, I'm going to do this out of the goodness of my heart. I'm going to do it on a Saturday. I'm going to take a shift because I know that South Lanarkshire's struggling, but I don't know what you get paid, but I know it's a lot more than what the carers get paid. So you're going to get paid what the carers get paid, or you're going to get paid what you get paid an hour? Because I think that's an issue that needs to be addressed. So I'll leave you at that, and I might have a subsequent question depending on what you say, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Chair, if you're quite happy, I'll just respond to that.
Yes, please do, Kate.
Yeah. So probably wise that I don't go turn out and care for some of our vulnerable. I'm sure I would not perform that role nearly as well as the vast majority of our very skilled workforce. I'm not even very good with houseplants, so don't let me loose for a minute. If I can reassure you that we do always pay people the rate for the job. So in the unlikely event that I did put myself forward to volunteer, I would get paid the rate for that activity, and that's part of our equal pay response, in that we deal with people equitably across the organisation. I did see the press piece in relation to the letter that we sent out. The letter that we sent out was in response to some sensible workforce planning over the winter. You don't really need a crystal ball to realise that there will be occasions when some of the workforce go down through COVID or through contact unexpectedly, and we then need a bank arrangement in order to be able to respond very quickly and to support the vulnerable people within our own workforce. It's very unfortunate the way that was portrayed within the press. It's just a sensible thing to be doing with the winter that we are facing. In terms of the rest of the terms and conditions, the normal terms and conditions apply. I would say we've had quite a good response to the ask of the workforce, and we've had actually quite a few people who already exist within social work, for example, offering to do some additional shifts in there, so they are trained. We would absolutely not put anybody out to look after the vulnerable in our community who were not suitably trained, and those things are all in train in order to be in place. So as I say, we just apply our normal terms and conditions. We don't do anything different, and we pay people the rate for the job that they're doing. I think does that answer your question?
And Chair, if I could come in with a subsequent, it actually answers the majority of them, and thank you very much for that. The one subsequent that I had was actually with regards to then training. What I wondered was, had we looked at some sort of like cost analysis for somebody that would need to get the required training to do the job? But, there's a difference between, so obviously we've got part-time, we've got full-time workers. So we've got an investment strategy and what we'll do with the required training that needs to, be done for somebody to care. Had we looked at a cost analysis for, somebody that's only going to do one shift to somebody that's doing more than one shift? And the other thing I wanted to ask was, currently, now you maybe have to help me out with this, right? The qualification that the carers need to do, they've got to pay for. It's a registration, I think that's what it is. So they are responsible for paying for their own registration. See, when we have basically put that out to our other employees, I take it they will then be responsible for having to pay for their own registration, of which, by the way, just so you know, I don't believe that anybody should have to pay for the registration. I believe that should be something that local authorities should pay for. But it's just to say, again, from the equalities point of view then, so because the local authority at present have the people pay for their own registration, is that what they are going to do with the people that come in? Or are they now going to look at the fact that they should actually be paying for everybody's registration?
Okay, thank you. Through you, Chair, I would say we've got a bit of a mixed bag. So we have got some people who've applied who are already registered. So it's not really an issue there. We have others who are applying to get the training, and they're perhaps looking for a bit of a career change. So we've had, for example, a few of the facilities staff who will be disclosure checked already because they're working in schools, but they will then have to go and be trained and registered in order to work in the workforce in that area. It's an interesting point about the fees. I'll dig in a little bit deeper on that. I don't have that to hand, but I do know through the pandemic we did have specific arrangements for short-term volunteers, etc., etc. So I'm suspecting that may well still apply, but I'll double check that particular point for you.
That's great, Chair. So it was just to say, if you could check that point, and then if you could note it in the minutes that I've asked that question. Could I also thank my colleague, Councillor Condry, for catching that at the start of the meeting, because I had another meeting, so I signed on late, so I apologise for that. But if it could be noted in the minutes, and also if you could come back, and if it could be noted in the minutes, that if they are doing it to that detail, that I do think it's something that across the board, that as a local authority, especially now more than ever, that we should definitely be paying for everybody's registration across the board, and it shouldn't be something that people are actually asked to do when they're not paid a high enough wage, as far as I'm concerned anyway, to do such an important job for the most vulnerable in our society. Anyway, thank you very much, and thanks for your indulgence, Chair.
Okay, thank you. No more questions for Kay? Okay, thank you. Agenda item 4 is education resources, workforce monitoring from June to August 2021, and that's on pages 29 to 36, and I'll ask Eileen to take us through that item. Thank you, Eileen.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So this report provides the standard workforce monitoring information for education resources for the period June to August 2021. So section 4.1 outlines the attendance statistics, and the details are in Appendix 1. So the resource absence figure for August 2021 was 2.8%, and that compares to a council-wide figure is 1.9%, lower than the council-wide figure. So based on these figures that are reported, the projected annual absence for the resource for 21-22 is 3.9%, compared to a council-wide figure of 4.8%. So section 4.2 to 4.5, the details are in Appendix 2, and the main highlights are that during the period there were 322 occupational health referrals, there was 131 accidents or incidents recorded, there was 10 disciplinary hearings, there was no grievances or dignity at work issues raised, and during the period there was 90 leavers and 23% of them completed exit interviews. Section 4.7, the details are in Appendix 2, and that provides details of posts that became vacant during the period. So there was 260 posts that became vacant, and managers have indicated that 254 of them will be replaced and filled. 5 of them are related to fixed term arrangements, and there was 1 post that was being held for savings. So I'm just asking to refer back to section 2 and ask that the content of the report be noted, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Eileen. Any questions or comments for Eileen? Monique?
Hi, thanks, Chair. Eileen, do you think, see the post that's been held for savings, do you think that that's something that's been facilitated through the fact that the head teachers are able to use their PEF money to take on staff? Therefore, because they've been able to use the PEF money, that's then allowed that saving?
You know, I think there's probably quite a few things that are in play here. There's quite a lot of recovery money that's in play, so there may well be that when I'm saying it's been held for savings, it may well be that there's actually just a review of a particular area, and then the post might be filled at a later date. It's just the managers have indicated they're not filling it just now.
Right, okay. And can I ask, because there's 2 sets of figures, and Kate, maybe it's more, sorry, Chair, can I ask another questions? I apologise, it was just in the back of that.
Yeah.
Sorry, Isabel, I apologise. It was just to say that obviously there's like 2 sets of figures, aren't there? So there's the teachers' figures that come under the budget for the money that comes through the money that obviously that we get from the government, and obviously, well, general revenue again, and everything that we bring in with it, right? So that's what is used to pay for the teachers. But then obviously there's ring fence money through projects, i.e. the PEF. So that comes in. So that then pays for a separate budget. I take it then when these figures are reported to us, that even though they run under 2 separate budgets, they're put together for the actual figures, or are the figures kept separately?
No, they're put together for the actual figures. So you're looking at all the posts that have become vacant across the resource.
Right, okay, just wanted to check. Thank you very much. It's just to get a better understanding. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Jerry?
Thanks, Chair. Eileen, see this one here, 4.4. There was 10 disciplinaries, which is quite a lot compared to us. It's been up for 8 for that time last year. Was that, what type of employee was that? Was that the teaching side, or was it the backup staff?
I don't have the detail in terms of the breakdown because it's just reported, but I can get that to you and get a detail in terms of whether it was local government employees or teachers.
And can we also get in 4.5 the analysis of leavers? I mean, 90 people left. That's a huge amount of people to leave. I'd like to know why did they leave, because we've not got it here why they left. We just said we had interview exits. Well, it would be nice to know what they said at the interview exit as to why they're leaving. Did we get that information?
Yeah, I can get that information, but that period does cover the end of term. So I would imagine that some of that will be people that are moving perhaps to another authority, because for teachers, they will move at that time of the year when it reaches the end of term and then move to another authority. So that might provide some explanation for that, but I can certainly get you a detailed breakdown of the reasons for leaving.
It would be helpful because at the end of the day, then it gives us the picture as the year goes on. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Can we agree to note the report?
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
Thank you. Agenda item 5 is SQA Provisional Awards 2021 Alternative Certificate Model. That's on pages 37 to 42, and I'll ask Stuart to speak to that. Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for the opportunity to come along and present to the forum today. Last session was tremendously difficult, I think across the piece, but in particularly in our schools for young people, for the families, and for all of our school-based staff and for school managers too. Under normal circumstances, school plans and school calendars of activity follow a very well-established annual cycle, none more so than the activity related to the preparation of young people for the national SQA exams. And the impact of COVID didn't just disrupt that cycle last session, it took the wheels clean off, so to speak. And this required then a significant level of cooperation, collaboration and commitment from colleagues to enable us to ensure that our young people were able to go on to complete their courses and to achieve and receive qualifications that reflected their own hard work and resilience and which reflected the national standards. So the purpose of this paper then is to provide a flavour of the changing circumstances that we found ourselves in education and the steps that we took in response to that. And section 3 of the paper sets out some of the background and context. And if you'd bear with me, I think it's worth noting the uncertainty that we faced at the time. And you know, with all of these situations, hindsight is wonderful as a tool for reflection. But at the time, circumstances were changing quickly, unexpectedly at certain points in time, and with a real lack of clarity about what might happen next. So at the start of this session, having initially been prepared for a diet of SQA exams as normal, it was decided in October 2020 that the National 5 exams would not go ahead and that qualifications then would be determined using an evidence-based alternative certification model known as the ACM, and that would be developed by a new national qualifications group, NQ21. It was further decided then in December, at the start of December 2020, to cancel both the higher and the advanced higher exams, and that the alternative certification model would have to be adapted to allow for certification at those levels as well. A significant change for us all in terms of scale and in terms of work that had already been done in planning for higher and advanced higher candidates. So plans were then amended, if you like, and developed to allow schools to submit awards at all levels based on teacher professional judgment of pupils' demonstrated attainment, and that attainment needed to be supported by appropriate evidence. Now, at that time, in December, schools and students were well on the way to prepare for prelims. Those prelim diets normally take place in January or perhaps even towards the start of February anyway. And those prelims, it was intended at that point, would provide, if you like, the backbone of that evidence to support the certification process for higher and advanced higher candidates. However, we were absolutely hijacked by the turn of events, and as stated in 3.5, without warning, Scotland went back into lockdown in January of 2021, and that completely removed the opportunity to run those prelims and to develop that body of evidence to support attainment. Not only that, we had no indication of when pupils might be able to return to schools. So the NQ21 group Now that included membership from not just the SQA but also from local authorities, from teacher and head teacher unions, from Scottish Government, Education Scotland, and from colleges and the independent schools as well. They worked to make some changes to support the alternative certification model. They extended deadlines, and in fact the deadline for the submission of awards and grades was taken right back to the final day of term. They took steps to reduce accessible content, to provide additional resources and support for school staff, and indeed to provide additional time, a couple of extra in-service days, to allow additional assessment, verification and moderation activity to be undertaken. But I have to say, what happened next was one of the most challenging periods for secondary schools that I think anybody currently working in education can recall, and it did require an unprecedented level of cooperation and commitment, as I go on and note in section 4. Thankfully, senior pupils were able to return, were allowed to return to schools just prior to the spring break, and a tremendous effort was then made to get them across the finish line. Section 4 then notes that in education we maintained a very close working relationship with our head teachers and with our teacher unions throughout the course of the session. We were able to explore and discuss issues as and when they arose, and that really allowed us to gain a shared understanding of the matters in hand from a range of perspectives, and that was tremendously helpful. And as a result of that, we were able to work together to provide co-produced guidance to our schools and to provide a body of support which was seen to be measured and seen to be proportionate, and which then allowed us to develop credible awards for our young people. And that activity was acknowledged by HMIE, by the Inspectorate, as good practice. We mobilised our subject networks. We mobilised central staff to plan for assessments and supported them to undertake moderation and verification activities. And this was all done within the tightest of timescales. And of course, at that time, we were also trying to continue with learning and teaching as far as we possibly could to allow young people to complete courses. And we were working and continuing teaching well into the period where we would normally have stopped for exams. And that was going on well into the start of June. Centres prepared materials to support the awarding process, and the provisional awards or provisional grades that we intended to submit were moderated, and that included participation in the national sampling exercise, where SQA lifted a body of materials from each subject across schools to allow that national standard to be applied. The proposed provisional awards were scrutinised at school level and certainly from us as a central team at local authority level, being signed off by head teachers and submitted to SQA, as I say, at the end of June. I mentioned HMIE, and Section 5 notes that they undertook scrutiny of all local authorities during the course of that period, and that included meetings with central management teams, also meetings with head teachers and SQA coordinators, and also meetings with the professional associations and teachers' representatives. And as I said earlier, we were commended for the clarity of our communication and the consistency of our messaging across the piece, and I think that ongoing collaborative work stood us in good stead. Critical, though, to the whole process was communication with young people and their families during that time. It was tremendously difficult for them in terms of expectation and knowing what was going to be happening next. Section 6 notes, I suppose I would summarise the approach we took as no surprises. We wanted to make sure that by the time grades were being finalised, every young person knew exactly what they were getting, and maybe more importantly, why they were getting it. So we maintained dialogue with young people and with families at every step of the way. They knew where they stood in terms of assessments, they knew where they stood in terms of the progress they were making, and maybe more importantly, they knew what they needed to do in order to achieve the target grades that we had in place for them. By the end of the term, we had confirmed with every young person exactly what grades were going to be submitted for them. As a result of that, we were also able to support young people who were maybe going to be disappointed with some of the grades that they were achieving. And as I say, that no surprises impact allowed us to support young people at an earlier stage, and indeed in some cases to switch to their plan B, if you like, at an earlier stage as well. One of the outcomes of the whole process is that we had fewer appeals than we've had in previous years, significantly fewer appeals, and we also had fewer complaints or concerns raised by candidates or by the parents from those who felt that they didn't get what they deserved. I think across the piece, the message that we got back is people felt that they were treated fairly and were able to achieve awards that accurately reflected the work that they had done and the evidence they were able to submit. And Section 7 goes on to note that the outcomes we achieved, we believe, were very positive, that candidates across the board performed at least as well as they did in previous sessions in all measures. One of the features that we saw nationally and was reflected in our own schools was that in many subjects we did see a higher proportion of A's than in previous sessions, and that's perhaps as a result of some of the factors that I note in 7.2. Certainly many of the candidates felt that removal of that final big exam, if you like, an opportunity to fail, it meant that they were better prepared or better able to demonstrate what they could do rather than worrying about what they mightn't be able to do on the day. So we now find ourselves looking ahead to next spring. As stated in Section 8, we're working towards a revised set of national qualifications, so there are changes and amendments in place, but the current plan is that there will be a diet of exams much as normal. That said, contingency planning is very much in place in the event that the exams do need to be cancelled again. Clearly, we all hope that things will continue to move in the right direction, but there is absolutely no certainty there. So we're continuing to work with our schools and with our teacher unions to ensure that we don't find ourselves trying to do additional internal assessment alongside exam preparations at the same time. You know, we're absolutely aware of the potential to overload both students and teachers at what is already a pressing and difficult time for us all. Chair, as I said at the start of my presentation, this was a tremendously challenging session, but we've come through it having learned an awful lot. And when I say we, I mean the central teams, our school staff, our school managers, and certainly our teachers and professional associations are continuing to work together to ensure that this group of young people who are currently in the system are served well by the schools and that they too have the opportunity to achieve a set of qualifications that are a credible representation of their achievements measured against the national standard. And with that, I refer the forum to Section 2 and ask that the effective partnership working undertaken in support of SQA awards for candidates presented this session be noted. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Stuart, and I'd like to thank you and your team for the excellent work that you've done throughout this extremely difficult time. So thank you all very much and congratulations. It's great work that's been done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dominique, I think you were hand up first.
Thanks. Yeah, do you know, Stuart, complete sentiments, same for me as, what Isabel's just said. I think that your department, education in it full, had a very, very difficult time. I think it was a rocky road. I think you've had probably more bumps than anyone else because it's been so up and down. I think it's a credit to you and your staff to the stage that you actually got to. What I wanted to ask was, though, so obviously when we talk about the curriculum for excellence and we talk about it's, something that's got a very holistic approach and it's like takes in all the different learning styles from all the different ways of learning, do you not think it's about time that we actually then changed the way that we do exams? Because as you quite rightly pointed out, when it wasn't the big exam at the end, that took away the fear factor, and people just, obviously with like the assessments they do as they go along as part of the investigation. Do you not think it's about time that that's something that we as a local authority, say through our talks with COSLA and the unions, that it's something that we've got an exam system that is very black and white with regards to it's like lists and whatever else, and it's like you must answer this particular type of answer for this particular question, whereas the holistic approach that we're actually teaching in our schools takes in all your different types of learners, and then it just means that the teachers are the best qualified as the kids are going along, so it kind of seems to be a bit bonkers to me. So what do you not think there's something we could do as a local authority to actually try and pull the education system together so that it's not one type of exam that doesn't marry up with the type of teaching we're doing through the holistic approach in the curriculum for excellence?
Thanks very much, Chair. If you're okay, I'm quite happy to respond. You're absolutely right that this has now, as a moment in time, forced a change to what has previously happened. And as a result of that, as I said, learning has taken place, significant learning. What's also happened is this now coincides, not just, so we're not in a position where, as South Lanarkshire, or whether it's me or Tony, has to take a unilateral stance in this. I think it's been recognised through the OECD report that we saw prior to the summer that we need to take pause and reflect and consider now, for example, that the point you make well around the articulation between the broad general education and the qualifications phase, the senior phase, and particularly the backwards influence or the reverse influence on learning and teaching and on assessment approaches that having a high stakes final exam model holds. So the starting point there is there's clearly a need to stop and reflect on that. The OECD have also said we need to consider more widely the groups who are involved in delivering that. So the SQA will continue for a period of time, but Ken Muir is currently looking at a review to review the qualifications process. And we're also looking again at the scrutiny and the policy function. So those things are now up in the air. We also have the paper from Gordon Stobart, following on from the OECD, which looks at alternative models used in other areas across the world. And essentially what they're saying is there are other ways of doing this, that the final high stakes exam is not the only way to do it. And of course we see that in our own university sector, we see that in our college sector, and certainly some of the learning that we've had to undertake last year shows that. So all of the things that you've said, I think are absolutely in line with our own thinking. That I'm minded of a discussion that started with the slide, the opening plate from Winnie the Pooh, where Christopher Robin is taking Winnie the Pooh by the ankle and he's coming down the stairs. And the recaption is Winnie the Pooh saying, I'm sure there's a better way. I'm sure I could think of a better way of doing this if only it would stop bumping for long enough to let me do that. I think we've just taken that wee pause there. I think we've stopped bumping down the stairs. We've had a chance to say, yes, we can do it differently. What I would say is this year has been far from perfect. The work that had to be done between Easter and between the summer to get over the line was phenomenal, and I think it's no one asked that we can repeat. And I think that teachers and teacher unions are particularly twitchy, but so are head teachers and I think young people too. So we do need to take a measured and a proportionate view of how we would approach that. But in essence, yes, the time is very much now to stop, to reconsider what we're looking for from our qualification system and how better we can reflect the changing needs of the world of work, the changing needs of further and higher education, and certainly to consider what we want our young people to be able to do by the time they leave.
That's great, Chair. Thank you very much. And Stuart, thank you very much.
Thank you, Stuart. Jerry?
Thanks, Chair. No, Stuart, very enlightening indeed. Can I just extend it a wee bit and ask the question, which is not in the paper, it's relevant to the paper, but it's not in it. See disadvantaged kids, have we done an analysis during the lockdown of how they cope, because they, by their very definition, they're poorer and they're disadvantaged. They've got a harder ladder to climb onto and climb up. Do we have any facts or figures, or are we getting it collated just to where these kids were pre-COVID and where they are now post-COVID? Because I tend to think, my gut reaction is they will need to spend money to bring these kids up, because I think during the lockdown they missed out on a lot for a whole host of things I'm not going to get into, and and everybody knows the poverty or what have you. But the report, he's done a great job. I mean, during that, what happened was phenomenal. Nobody can deny that. What happened, and it's a credit to everybody. That's how I was asking for the statistics earlier on, the 90 that left. Is it folk just bloody stressed out and they've left it? No, but these are important things, because they all make up the big picture at the end of the day. And you made the most valid point, I thought, in your whole contribution. Let's take time to pause. Let's just stop saying we need to do that. We don't need to do it. We need to pause, and we need to make sure that everybody is going along the one track. So well done. Thanks.
Chair, I'm happy to respond. Thank you very much, Councillor, for your comments, and it's hugely appreciated, and I will feed back to colleagues the support and the positive comments we've had today. But you're right, young people from backgrounds of deprivation have, for the last 10 years or so, we've been talking about closing the poverty-related attainment gap. And we mentioned PEF earlier on, attainment challenge monies, and so on. And actually, it's continued to be a pervasive and a very sticky problem. One of the interesting things that's come out of the last 2 years. So if you recall 2020, we'd finished all the courses and programmes, but the diet of exams was cancelled at the last minute, and we went into not quite a full alternative certification model, but a model where derived grades were submitted by schools, and then last year we had the full alternative certification model. And in both of those years, attainment went up, as we might expect, by the removal of the final exam, i.e. that final opportunity to fail for some young people. But what we did see was quite a significant closing of the poverty-related attainment gap, and that might reflect some of the prior dialogue about young people from maybe more affluent backgrounds, or young people from backgrounds where there has been a history of academic success being better prepared for exams. So it's not about what they know or what they can do or who they are as people. It's how well prepared they are to sit and to pass exams. And what's been interesting is we've seen a bit of a closing of the gap there. And that does go back then to looking at methods of assessment and certification which better reflect the needs of the population. One of the things that we're up against, and I say with no sense of irony, is though that all of us who are charged with running and implementing and changing the system tend to be people who have benefited and been successful through what's gone before. So that there's a systemic inertia in there, and a systemic sense of why change something that's working for us. And I think that notion of taking pause and taking stock and reflecting allows us to do something a bit smarter, a bit better, and certainly a significant bit fairer. And our focus in terms of our own plans for recovery are very much around poverty and deprivation, around disadvantage, making sure that even simple things like access to IT has been addressed, and we've been able to spend money this year to extend. Last year we put out a significant number of devices, but we also put out a significant number, almost 1,000 connectivity solutions. So we gave data packages to families that didn't have them, and we've been able to extend that for another year. So that's a practical example of what we're trying to do to not just close the gap in terms of attainment, but close the gap in terms of opportunity and equity there. But that continues to be very much at the top of our own agenda as well, Councillor.
Thank you, Stuart. Ian?
Thank you. I think the point I'm going to make relates to one of the points that Stuart made just when he was speaking there, that the rush to avoid or to maybe to get rid of exams, which I think Monique was hinting at. No, if you'll tell me if I'm wrong. I think teachers, a lot of teachers anyway, might have a different kind of opinion, because there's quite a lot of them who think that that is the fair way, because obviously everybody throughout Scotland is doing the same thing. I do appreciate that there are other opinions on that. So before we kind of rush into getting rid of exams, obviously there will be a kind of process to consult various groups. And all I can say is I'm glad I got out last June before all this started. I think I'd be a nervous wreck by now. Thanks, Chair.
Chair, I'm happy to respond very quickly to that. I'm a sums teacher to trade, and sums teachers are notoriously the last people. We will cling on to grim death to the idea of tests and more tests, and then a couple of assessments, and then another test. So I'm kind of with you there, and I think there is, the potential for a baby in bathwater scenario to take place here, and I think that's why we need to have a very mature conversation. Gordon Stobart's paper is a good starting point, and the fact that we might talk about getting rid of a final one-off high-stakes final assessment, that doesn't mean that young people then no longer have to go through a rigorous or a credible process. I think what we do need to do is consider how that's managed within schools. That bit about what is fair. Is it fair that we've got a system that's predicated on some people are able to do more in terms of tutoring and preparation than others? Or are we looking at a system which is looking at how fairly we can assess the skills, the abilities and the wider attributes? And one of the things that we focus on is the exams are easy to measure. We've got quantifiable numbers. We can have a year-on-year comparison there. But the point of Curriculum for Excellence was about a wider set of attributes, a wider set of skills and abilities. And it's how do we recognise and acknowledge their worth in a world where any of us can pick up knowledge by going on to Google for 5 minutes. Not everybody can pick up the types of values, the types of dispositions that we are trying to embody and trying to build there. But you're right, there is no point in building a new system which has no credibility, no rigour, and where everybody gets an A off the back of doing the best and everybody trying to support them. So we do need to look at that, and I think the Stobart paper is a good starting point where it looks at how it's done in different areas of the world, what we might want to learn from that, and how we take it forward. And you're right, we've got some big thinkers in Scotland as well. We've got the likes of Mark Priestley is pushing the debate on, and certainly the Ken Muir Review will push that debate on as well. I think there's a way to go before we get to what that end point will be, but I'm confident that by that time everybody will have an opportunity to have the say and to be fully involved in the debate.
Thank you, Stuart. Monique, you want to come back in?
Yeah, thanks, Stuart. It was just to say, Ian, that was the point I was getting to. I wanted to know what Stuart felt about exams, but Stuart, you're on the exact same page actually as me, because I just think that thinking about from what I know about the Curriculum for Excellence and relating it to today and the job market, it's not a case of you just go for a job now and it's just like, it's that one interview. I don't know many jobs, it's just one interview now. It's a process of elimination. Sometimes you've got to write plans. It's STAR techniques that you use now. It's situational, task orientated. It's all changed. So I think the education needs to change along with it. But I do agree that obviously to give the security that there does need to be the actual test, but I just don't think it needs to be that big one oof at the end. I think the investigations and everything that go along. So I think it's good to know that basically like everybody's effectively on the same page. I think even though Ian's saying something slightly different, that it's a case of we know that we need to actually look at the process, do what you say, take a deep breath, look at the process, think about what things work, and it's like anything else, what can we do better? So I think it's good to know that we're actually going to be sitting down and having an adult conversation at a table, looking at the pros and cons and actually saying, right, what is it we need to do? So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other hands, so can we agree to note the report? Joe, do you want to come in?
Aye, it's just to find out when Kay's going to get in touch with me about these two ladies. I think it's hard that people have 20 years in here and all of a sudden been shoved to the side. When are you going to meet me, Kay? Or when are you going to phone me?
Kay?
Thank you, Chair. I've actually got a pretty busy schedule today, Councillor Lowe, but if you send me the details about the two individuals, I will endeavour to get back to you this week.
If you talk to education, they'll tell you how much it's costing them for taxis. No, they put taxis in. But these ladies were in our buses taking youngsters, as Jerry mentioned, about disabled kids. We're taking them to school and looking after them.
Joe, can you send Kay an email?
Just come along.
Joe, can you send Kay an email?
What's that?
Can you send Kay an email with the details?
If Kay wants an email, we'll get that done. No problem. But
okay.
It's a scandal. people who are looking after our disabled kids have been just dismissed. And then
Joe, take it up with Kay offline, please.
The job hasn't been dismissed. This is the place to air it.
Joe,
because this is what it's about.
Joe, will you email Kay, please, the information? I don't have any other urgent business that I've been advised of, so I'd like to thank you all very much for your attendance, and I'll ask Carol to stop the recording. Thank you very much. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
These people have came from my area, and you've